All right, hi everyone. The time for case building is already over. So quick roll call to make sure everyone's already here. Opening government, BINA DARMA, are you here and complete?
Yes, we are complete.
Awesome. Opening a position, ATMA JAYA Jakarta, here and complete?
Here and complete.
All right, great. Closing government, Telkom, here and complete?
Here and complete, Kak.
All right, who's speaking first?
Stanley.
All right, Stanley speaking first and Jocelyn speaking second, yeah. Closing a position, Tadulako, are you here and complete?
Yes, we're here and complete.
All right, who's speaking first?
Bangkit will be speaking first and Chandra is second.
All right, thank you so much. Awesome. And for the judges, just a minute. For Nova Anugrah, are you already here?
I'm here.
Awesome. Agni Satria.
Here, Kak.
Okay. Laksono Pranandito.
I'm here, Kak.
Okay. Sofyan Hidayat.
Yes, I'm here.
Awesome. All right, everyone's already here. Hi, everyone. My name is Muti. I'm going to be chairing this round. We're going to be talking about politics, several notes before we move on with the round. Firstly, don't forget to mention your POI preference before you start your speech so that it can be interrupted in the way that you prefer, either through chat box or raising hand or probably unmute. And secondly, don't forget to mention your preferred pronoun as well, if you have any, and if you're comfortable in stating that so they can be addressed in the pronoun that you prefer. And last but not least, I'm going to help you guys with providing timestamps in the chat box. But just in case there's going to be connection issues or internet troubles in the middle, please also time yourself before you start your speech. So that's all. I think that being said, we can directly proceed with the second round of this year's NUDC. To open the debate, we would like to welcome Prime Minister. Floor is yours. You're here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Hello everyone, my preferred pronoun is she, her, and for POI, please do it through the chat box. And I'll set my timer. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, wokeness is a concept used when someone is woke and they finally educated and finally realize the unjustified in today's world. And the word woke itself often associated by the society with someone as being well educated and understand of others' pain, etc., and do a lot of research toward a sensitive social matters, right, ladies and gentlemen. It brings a status to someone, a social status that you're smart, you're educated, you're open to what is really happening in the world. But the problem, ladies and gentlemen, is in the status quo, the term woke has been very, very overused and taken out of context oftenly and lose its meaning and the real goal why it was made in the very first place, and instead of then backlashing the goal of the term woke itself. Therefore, under our side, we believe that the emphasis of wokeness has bring more harm than good. And now coming to my argument, why we believe that emphasis of the word wokeness in today's political discourse bring more harm than good. Ladies and gentlemen, first we need to understand how is the emphasizement of the word woke is going on, right? How the word woke are used in the society right now. Ever since its appear, the popularity of the word woke, just like other phrase that has rocketed and be viral, the term woke is used in many discourse, especially political, right? But the problem is, woke brings a deep matter behind the word, right? It's representing a complicated and sensitive problem. It's about educating yourself. It's about opening yourself. It's about your intention to bring the word into more awareness, to bring the society into more education. And it's here to start a difference toward problem that get often ignored, such as racism, sexism, and other social problems. This is what the word woke should have contained and be present, right, ladies and gentlemen? It's supposed to be filled with people who actually know what is the matter and what is wrong in the society. However, the way woke is used right now, it is overused. Why we say that? Because everyone uses it in the social media, ladies and gentlemen, regardless they are actually know something or not. In every argument, regardless they actually know the issue, regardless whether they have spent a lot of time to do journal research, etc. They use the word woke, ladies and gentlemen, to only represent their feeling that they are smart enough, or to represent the feelings that they can outsmart you. You just use it to mock other people. It also not become just a way for you to feel arrogance, ladies and gentlemen. It also becomes a jokes, a meme template, and even a way to mock people, ladies and gentlemen. So instead of being a way for you to for us to classify this is woke people who can educate me, the word woke is used globally without even any meaning whether you are actually woke or not, right, ladies and gentlemen. There are a lot of self-claimed people who is woke and other who thinks that woke is already only a satire, to think that woke is not even about being smart anymore. And ladies and gentlemen, the things about being overused and being used everywhere in every template, especially social media, it means that it's already prevent our progressivity, right? Because it became a wall that prevent the problem to be discussed intensively. Because as I said before, the word woke representing a lot of sensitive problem that needs a lot of time to be understood, ladies and gentlemen. However, the word woke, just because you say you are woke, or you think that someone is woke because they self-claim themselves in Twitter that they are woke, you just believe everything that they share in the social media. You just believe everything that they create by conspiracy theory, etc. in the social media, because they are self-claimed woke, ladies and gentlemen. And this is the start of sharing of misinformation, ladies and gentlemen, which means that there are a lot of misinformation happening in the social media right now, and it makes the problem of the real issue that need to be discussed behind the word woke is missed, right, ladies and gentlemen. And secondly, it becomes a source of arrogancy instead of education, ladies and gentlemen. People who self-claim that they are woke think of this as a title, think of this as a crown, ladies and gentlemen, instead of a way to educate other people. So if they think that they are woke and they see people who is still conservative or still not open-minded enough to accept other people, they just bully other people who is claimed as not woke, ladies and gentlemen. They do it without the step of educating and approaching other people. And also, this create a culture or also a strategy that is problematic in the effectivity and the harm of the strategy toward the problem to the word woke, right, ladies and gentlemen. These people, because of they are preventing the problem to be discussed intensively, they are only focusing on the trend that they want to believe that they are woke, ladies and gentlemen. There are no intensive discussion. There are no researchers who are actually going out to see what is the problem. Then it creates a lot of strategy coming from the woke people that such as the strategy like cancel culture, strategy of neo-feminism or reverse sexism, who's still problematic and who's still having a lot of complicated and backlashing and other problem. They're still not guaranteed whether or not it is a good strategy or not, right, ladies and gentlemen. This is also happening that because people don't want to actually change the problem behind the word work, like the word work, like ladies and gentlemen. In the politics, right now, they are only using in the word work only to be included in the society, only to be seen as good in the social media, and not because they care about the real matter, right, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, we believe that the emphasis of work has prevented the development of discourse, political discourse, because this is the thing that's also been used by the politician, right, ladies and gentlemen. They are using it as much as a society. They are only portraying themselves as good and self-claimed work just to be a strategy, to be a good politician, ladies and gentlemen, and gain supporter. Not only that, the general political discourse that is being discussed in the internet, as has been explained, is full of arrogancy, full of empty self-claimed people and misinformation in the political discourse in social media itself. Therefore, we believe that the emphasis of the word work has bring more harm than good. We beg to propose.
All right, thank you so much for the fine speech. Now to open the case of opening opposition, we're calling upon leader opposition. Floor is yours. You're here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, prefer gender pronouns she or her. If you're on a POI, please just type it in the chat. I'll make sure the chat box is open. Okay. Wait. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. When we're talking about political discourse, we're talking about policies, we're talking about the implementation of legislation, we're talking about in regards to people's votes, right? This talks about the impact towards parties that exist in the current status quo. We're talking about social injustices and how they are able to be achieved, right? But when we talk about wokeness, it's not only about the use of the term wokeness, right? The emphasis of wokeness in today's political discourse is not only when you use the word, oh, I'm woke, or that person is woke, right? When we use wokeness in political discourse, it is also pushing the values behind it, right? This looks like, for example, if a politician is, for example, is talking about racial minorities, or is have policies that is in regards to protect the racial minorities, then they will be seen as woke, right? They cannot suddenly self-proclaim, especially when it comes to politicians. So we have so many check and balances in social media. But not only that, we can always see the wokeness, for example, through their campaigns or through the proposed policies, or even through the policies that they have created in the very first place, right? So what the government house tries to tell you that, oh, politicians can suddenly self-proclaim to make it as a form of self-proclamation that they are woke and attract people. We think that that's not the case, right? In the current status quo, we see that in societal discourse, people have already discussed about it, and we acknowledge that, right? That people in societal discourse have already known about political, how to be quote unquote be woke, or like people know about, for example, racial minorities issues, etc. Right? But we think that when it comes to political discourse, this is when we take it a step further, right? We think that this is when it creates more harm, it creates more good than harm in today's political discourse, right? So all my rebuttals will be integrated within my speech. So first argument then on how the emphasis on wokeness pushes an ideal political discourse, right? When we're talking about ideal political discourse, right? We're talking about policies or changes that can cater to what people need, right? Cater to social issues and injustices. We're talking about protecting minorities, right? We think when it comes to wokeness, the vulnerable actors here are minorities, right? Be it racial minorities, be it sexual minorities, be it religious minorities, right? We have so many people that should be catered, right? But the urgency here is when politics and political discourse in the current status quo are only focused for you on getting votes from the majority, right? This looks like most likely the discourse will be surrounding issues that what majority concerns, right? They don't really care about the racial minorities, sexual minorities. They have really small voices, right? This is when the emphasis of wokeness is very important, right? Because when you have this emphasis on wokeness, what this will look like is, for example, political discourse will spotlight less prioritized issue, right? Because exactly, you need to emphasis on the wokeness. You want people to be woke, right? Oh, you need to be woke, for example. Oh, you need to search for a woke politician, for example, right? This is how the political discourse will look like. Most likely, they're going to highlight, for example, regarding religious minorities, how they are not able to build, for example, their place of worship, for example, in a certain area. We think this is what they can cater to, right? We think that when this happens, this is also when it is not also in the society as well within people to talk about regarding this wokeness on how you need to be woke, for example, right? They're telling other people regarding these things. This looks like, for example, in social media, there will be accounts that talks about, about wokeness. There will be so many accounts that talks about, for example, sexual minorities, etc. Right? And we think that the exclusivity of political discourse and why then wokeness should be emphasized on political discourse is that political discourse is what leads to policies to be made, right? Political discourse are the things that lead, to create legislation, to create actual changes that can be implemented towards people, right? We think that wokeness brings this tangible benefit towards the people, especially those who are all these times are being overlooked, right? Exactly because they are, for example, they don't cast as much vote, right? We think when wokeness is something that is emphasized, we think that most likely people would opt into this, right? Sure, maybe they for in the very beginning they maybe opt into it because of trend, for example, because they want to be seen as. We think that it is okay, right? We think that even if they at the very beginning, opt into it because of trend, we think that at the end of the day they will be, for example, in their social media, most likely their algorithm will change, right? They will have more posts or more videos that is related to more progressive values for example, right? We think that just people by opting into this wokeness, we think that this is how we can actually create changes and create a more nuanced political discourse comparatively to the current status quo, for example, that is only focusing on majority issues and not actually focusing on the wokeness. We think that this emphasis on wokeness make people realize how important this is. Yes, we're pushing so much of this urgency exactly because it is that urgent, because all these years people are being overlooked, right? Their priorities are not seen as important because they cannot cast as much vote. If the political climate looks like more people are opting into this wokeness or talking about even more woke issues, for example, right? This is how then politicians can actually see this and see that their target of people, of voters, has changed, right? Exactly because these people have better priorities on spotlighting these less prioritized issues earlier, right? So that's an argument then on how this can create better policy changes that can cater to the most vulnerable actor. We think when this has happened, this is when, right, people are able then to cast their votes to parties that cater to wokeness, right? Exactly because this wokeness talks about all these racial minorities, talking about sexual minorities, etc. Right? We think that this is how we can create better policy changes. Exactly because it is included in political discourse, not only in societal discourse. Things cannot stop in societal discourse. It needs to go to political discourse for people. Even like, for example, this is the only way for conservatives to be able to then conservatives to be able to see these things, right? Because maybe before in societal discourse, they don't have people surrounding around them that talks about these issues. But when it comes to political discourse, this is when, for example, these kind of discourse that exists in televisions or in social media can reach these conservative people, right? We think this is how then we're able to cater, for example, people in gray area, exactly because we are crystallizing the things that the society has been talking about through policies, through legislation. This is how then, for example, campaigns can be changed for them to cater to more progressive values, for example. And this is how then politicians are able to create policies that are actually catering to minorities, and people would actually vote for them, right? And they would actually vote for pushes for changes. This looks like, for example, choosing the member of the House of Representative members that are actually progressive, right? This changes can only happen when there's this emphasis on wokeness, right, into this political discourse that brings so much benefit towards the current status quo issue that Romi said so proud to oppose.
All right, thank you so much for the fine speech. Now to summarize and close the case of opening government, we're calling upon Deputy Prime Minister. Floor is yours. You're here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, my name is Zara Zetira and my pronouns is she or her, and my PI preference to chat box, and I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, the word work, as my first speaker has explained, at the end of the day, it's about what can we do to the society itself, right? Because political and social discourse will always get intertwined to each other. But the thing is, seeing of how the word work is treated right now, we see that this is exactly how the wokeness will be treated in the political discourse too, because it will sell the social problem, sell the word work in the order to get society attention and to get support without actually want to learn and do something. Therefore, we believe that we must regret about this, because we agree if we need to put the problem into a step forward into the next stage. However, it is not going to work if the foundation is wrong to begin with, right? Because it's gonna work in the politician keep on getting the wrong idea what is the work based on the society misinformation. Therefore, we don't want to do that, and we say that wokeness bring harm than good itself. Ladies and gentlemen, need to clarify in here, we believe that if the opposition side of the house said that the political discourse only focus on the majority issue, we say no, right? Because we already progressive enough by the campaign of Black Lives Matter, right? Because it's already bring in the political discourse too. Because it's even if this political discourse, we believe that comparing to the political discourse and also social media, we will bring this through the social media because we could reach more layer of society, and I will explain more in my argument. And coming to the argument, they said about the social minority, we could bring up the social minority if they are woke, only if they are woke. How about others, ladies and gentlemen? Because it's only create a new problem, because we don't think we could have the racism from the same race, right? Because instead of make a team with our same race, but the opposite side of the house, they are only yelling to the other minorities, because they only acknowledge only them being educated, only them being woke, ladies and gentlemen, and they are only left out the rest of the minority, right? Because we don't want to create other chaos, ladies and gentlemen. Sacrifice what we are, keep a good relationship with our same race. Therefore, we cannot be emphasize this kind of wokeness in the political discourse. And coming to my argument, ladies and gentlemen, we believe in the status quo right now. There are so many political discourse in all of aspects, especially humanity, right? The emphasis of the wokeness will bring more harm than good, because it's already lose the real meaning and God overuse in today's political discourse. Just to say, we believe that we don't want to emphasize the wokeness in political discourse. And coming to my argument first, why wokeness only bring more harm than good? Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that with wokeness, it only send us to the new problem, because we are create a gap from anyone just because we are educated, right? Because we believe that a function of being educated was useless when you are not respecting other people, ladies and gentlemen, because that's also part of educated, right? How to behave with someone, and also how to respond to someone, and also we with the glorifying of the wokeness, make all of people chaos, ladies and gentlemen, because most of people feel they are different, they are perfect, and they don't need help from another people. Just to say, it is contradicting with the idea of human nature, right? When you cannot stand alone, ladies and gentlemen, and at the end, as a human, we are still need someone. If we are still arrogant and also still rising the wokeness because we are educated, we believe that we cannot mingle with someone. We cannot mingle with someone. Therefore, we think the emphasis of weakness bring more harm than good, because it create bad narrative for the society, because we cannot control the social judgment, right? The amount of them could change the political discourse interest, because they are who are in the discourse are talking about only talking about wokeness and so on and so forth. Therefore, they only believe only in the wokeness, ladies and gentlemen, because they only believe that this only wokeness was good, ladies and gentlemen. Even they don't really know the real meaning of the wokeness. Therefore, was misleading. The information exists under their side, right? Therefore, the political discourse driven only by this wokeness people. And how about other people, ladies and gentlemen? Most of them lose their opinion on political discourse because they are still not educated enough, as a wokeness did at the very first place, right? Therefore, we could find never-ending gap in the political discourse. Therefore, it could be hampering the political discourse itself, because they lose their the other opinion in political discourse. Even they are needed, right? Therefore, we believe that it's only we will bring the wokeness in the wokeness, it's not in the political discourse. Only under our side, we believe that it will be better for word woke to stay exclusive, ladies and gentlemen, and the responsibility by people who actually know what's going on for the sake of the credible information taken in the political discourse. And we're very proud to propose this debate. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the fine remarks. Now, to close the case from opening opposition, also to summarize and close the opening half of the debate, we're calling upon Deputy Leader Opposition, Polly Shores. You're here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep, you are.
Okay, wait a second. Okay. Gender pronouns, he or him, POI preference is just through chat. I repeat again, POI preference through chat. Do not give me any POI with unmuting, raise hand, or something like that. Just through chat. And without any further ado, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. One main clarification that I want to give in this debate. Number one, we need to be understand that basically, sure, the politician is the one who can give the better policies or performance for the other people, which is we're talking about the majority, right? But what we want is not only just politicians who take care for the majority, but also take care with this minority people who basically are the one is very needed because they are the one who are left behind. They're the one who basically not really discussed enough in the political and so on and so forth. So we think that actually this is the urgency why we need to bring up the wokeness in the political discourse in the very first place, right? So two rebuttals I won't give in this debate. Number one, they're trying to expand from the Prime Minister to the Deputy Prime Minister, which is about how actually this can lose the meaning of wokeness, which is because of people only showing that they are being smart and so on and so forth, right? To respond to this, number one, within the actually this is completely untrue because basically the reasons why people, the one who are woke, try to bring this issue and so on and so forth is because of the expecting for changes, right? It's not only just changes that actually society try to accept you, society try to accept LGBT, feminism, and so on and so forth, right? But they really want to have the tangible things, which is something that really changed them in the very first place. For example, the one that we are knowing is affirmative actions, right? Exactly, they're expecting this. Exactly, they're expecting the policies that can be changed because they want not only people accept them, but they really want a small progressions. Actually, the things that can give them really space, give them fulfilling the basic need that they want in the very first place. And that's why this is very important in the very first place. But second response, even if the argumentation about this is so sure, maybe to some point we are lose the meaning because of we are talking about it, always talking about it and so on and so forth. Why this is the better, right? We think this is the better because we need to be understand. There's a significant differences between have wokeness in societal discourse with political discourse. When we're talking about in societal, basically you only expected people to accept you, which is very hard because basically people always have a different spectrum, a different political trust, have a different kind of belief or have a different kind of mindset and so on and so forth, right? This is very hard for you to change. But when we're talking about political discourse, you expected that this is not only just talking or discussing about whether the attitude have to be accepted or not, but this is talking about whether the tangible things should exist or not, which is the political, which is the policies, the regulations that everyone wants to know. Example, women, for example, want to get the same payment with male, but there's no transparency coming from the corporation and so on and so forth. People or women are expecting the actual political discourse really talking about transparency of people, of corporation and so on and so forth, right? They want changes and they want the policies. This is why this is very important to some degree, why we have the political discourse. This is the exclusivity that is less coming from the opening government because they're only talking about, yeah, there's a societal discourse and so on and so forth, but they never try to prove you or given the argumentation related about today political discourse. Even in their setup, there's no explanation about how the ideal political discourse should be look like under the side of the host, right? That's why this argumentation cannot be standing under the side of the host. Second, they keep talking about how actually people put misinformations, the meaning of wokeness, right? We said that actually this is untrue because the reasons why people or the minority, for example, making movement, BLM, feminist movement, even we are seeing that there's 4 waves of feminism and so on and so forth. It's exactly because of they want to give the information, exactly because of they want to clarify, want to other people aware to that basically we are the minority who are suffer. They want to make these people see that just the woman is, for example, being being discriminated in the corporations, being discriminated in get a fair educations. We want to see that actually there's a loss of racial discrimination because of maybe historically speaking, Black people most likely are being slavery and so on and so forth, trigger warning. And that's why within the actually this is very important for these people to exactly because of they are misinformed, they want to clarify that, and that's why they are making movement, have a goal, do campaign and so on and so forth. Exactly because of the end goal, they want changes, and that's why they are lobbying the government. That's the important things that coming from this wokeness in the political discourse in the very first place. Lastly, they're trying to talking about how actually people are being arrogant because of they are woke, because of they are only the one who are smart enough and so on and so forth. We didn't say this is exactly not true, because we think the moment that you are woke, it was the moment that you are very care and aware to the other people. Because you are woke, you are realizing that actually every people should be equally treated. That's why these people must actually not being arrogant, but they are trying to treat the other people by the same thing. For example, they are seeing the LGBT, they are more treated them equally with the other people who may be strike or something like that. Talking about feminism with male, they will be treated in the same way, and that's why we think actually this is not being arrogant. But even if this argumentation about this argumentation true, we think that actually this is still okay, because the trade-off is they are the one who are needed. They are the minority who being suppressed not only in this time, but historically speaking, they are the one who being unfairness. They are the one who, for example, feminism, they're the one who actually does have already do a lot of feminism work and so on. So exactly because of their own lobbying and try to represent that actually they are the one who are really oppressed and want to change this in the very first place. That's why this argumentation coming from OG cannot be run. Yes, the POI.
Okay, start on your side of the house to make people accept you because they're still not awoke. What makes you think that being very extreme with emphasis on them still not being awoke will make them to create changes on your side?
This is the important things when we're talking about wokeness and political discourse, right? Because sure, this is related to my second extension about how actually we can give a better check and balances. The moment that actually are trying to bring wokeness into the political discourse, sure, there are some people who are against it. There are some people who are maybe stands in conservative and so on and so forth. And that's why the check and balances exist. Because in the political, basically, if there's no wokeness and so on and so forth, most of the time the policy is always based on who are the one win the election. For example, if the one who are win the election is the Republican, for example, most of the time the policies is always be more conservative or more to the far right wing and so on and so forth, right? That's why we think that as the reasons, the accessibility why the wokeness is needed in the political discourse, because people have a different stance, people have a different political spectrum, and that's why when we have the discourse, we are discussing with each other. We are put the idea. We want try to have middle grounded policies have to be look like and so on and so forth. This is the importance why we need to bring the wokeness into the political discourse and not only in the societal in the very first place, right? So that's the second extension. Actually, then my extensions is only one left behind, which is how society will try to perceive this kind of discourse, right? We think that we need to be understand basically political always be subjective. It is always be talking about how people can have a representation and so on and so forth, right? That's why people are always trying to represent their living conditions, what they are actually needed as a rural area, as a social minority and so on and so forth, right? In FQ, people only debating, discussing on societal level, like social media, people are trying to give a campaign because of they want other people walk, other people understand and so on and so forth. But there is no end goal because you only try to expecting people to accept. When we're talking about political discourse, we have a better end goal because basically we have a new rules and regulation that can set what people needed in the very first place. That's why the participations, the people participation in the government will be much better under certain cost, exactly because of they are now have a platform for them to lobbying the government and so on. So exactly because of this political discourse, these politicians are take care of each other. These political are always talking about this in their discussion, and that's why this is very important for us to have this kind of benefit, and that's why we probably to propose this motion. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for the fine speech. Now to open the closing half of the debate, we're calling upon Member of Government, Flourish yours, you're here.
Am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, for POI, just to unmute yourself. I'm okay with verbal POI preference, and my gender pronoun is he or him. If my connection got cut off, will tell my teammates. Yeah, sorry for inconvenience. Okay, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. three framings under closing government. Firstly, we have to understand the contextualization of the areas that this motion applied, how society will respond to it, and how society will engage to it. Two things. Number one, I think in every country, there are the spectrum of societies, exactly like Opo said. There are conservative people that live in the current of unexposed by this progressivity, ideas like black fascist rhetoric, like feminism and so on. Secondly, these people in societies have different capacities and the ability to actually absorb the value and these ideas, because maybe these people got like unjust or unpleasable experience by canceling culture because they simply do not know these ideas exist, for example. This means these people really need the time and organic change to actually absorb these ideas by step-by-step process analysis. Second framings, you need to acknowledge and realize the status quo is not that good, unlike from OO characterization. Two things. First, political discourses are did by most of politicians and political parties. These ideas are utilized by majorities to begin with. The problem here, the one who did this narrative and this raising this awareness and emphasize it are actually the one who oppressed these matters to begin with, right? Secondly, even if that is not all of that true, these movements and political discourses means most of societies stigmatize these people because they are rich people, powerful people. That is why the origins of your progress and narrative will be stagnant and stop, because your movement right now will be seen as elitist and bad images. That's exactly happened on your side of the house. Last framing, the biggest prerequisite on opposition and on gov for create policies, more support, and so on, for people to opt in is people have to engage first and have the interest by these ideas to begin with. How people will absorb these ideas in discussion on gov will be applied contingent on this prerequisite that I will explain under closing government. These three framings engage to opening government. On opposition, the status quo is wrong, right? What the politician and majorities will actually do and will lead to harmful things to societies. Firstly, campaigning on political discourses. This means your kind of movement and narrative will created under the portrayal of mass publics will happen on social media news. The likelihood, because you always want to heavily emphasize that right to begin with, right? So it will lead to effectivity under your political campaigns. That is why how you get voted, for example. That is why you will use the mass publics and use this kind of news to actually polarize people, to actually like giving this kind of extremity and radical things. How then this portrayal and phenomenon will impact the societies? Opposition says that a political spectrum, different societies and families background. Exactly. The moment you do this, it generalizes all people to buy and opt in into your ideas, even that you are coming from different context, even if you're coming from conservative and gray area for your liberalism context ideas. Two things. Firstly, this can create justification as parameter you are being good society when you only do this kind of approach of workfulness. Secondly, this is the coercive action because your portrayal and glorification set the standards of you being woke is good and must and have to follow the standards. The impact is, firstly, your images will be seen as radical and elitist because people will coming from conservative era that always have bad experience, for example, that stigmatize. People will reject your ideas, for example. Secondly, many people will lose and neglect your movement as well and your political campaigns. And lastly, this is guilt trip to both of the actors, like people who already work but do not do the progress and people who not already work, right? For example, that these people already work but not doing action. We say this is okay in the minimal span of like short of time because we want to do it organic change, right? The moment when this kind of work people that not doing an action under your side of the house, you will be being stigmatized and people will canceling your culture because you don't do an action because this kind of standardization will already inherent and big in the status quo. People who not already woke up will not engage to your movement as well because people will like the cancel to begin with by your actions, right? We think under your status quo, it's not that really true. That people are really not every people really progressive. Not every people coming from like this same context. Not every people having that kind of same capacities for you to have this kind of acknowledgement in the societies. We think people will dismiss and doesn't want to hear you anymore, and people will eventually more stigmatize your political discourse, and this is will coming to the blame to the minorities as well because this caused by a problem of minorities. Under CG, we will go inherent here. We don't want to talk about misinformation and so on, but we want to erase what we do not want is to erase the progressivity and protect that all the actor and how to bring more sympathy under our side of the house and how all the goals that coming from OG will be mechanized under our side of the house. The positive cases under closing government. Why without this motion? Just doing organic change is really safe and more guaranteed possibilities of successful. Being moderate is like the safest process, like in the status quo exactly. Firstly, maybe like a feminist movement or maybe like other movement that like BLM that always said that maybe like in the current status quo, that firstly maybe they create like echo chamber to begin, for example, and secondly maybe they will have the braveness because they already have more members. It means they have more power, bargaining power in society, have more supporter, meaning you have a right and have capacity to raising the awareness to the social media, for example, and towards the public discussion and so on. But we do it not just like a strategy, but we do it in a strategic way, right? Not we going to like a mass media, mass public. We go to speech to this conservative area that we support LGBT, for example. We support like we support that kind of that, right? We do it strategically. That exactly happened in this process in the status quo, right? Then other than that, we give the portray of role model images, for example. It means that we create an organic change in order for you to do people have engaged to your kind of the house. How about the process for this? Firstly, we think this will be really more successful because societal norms change step by step, like to make majority to vote for policy making for minorities cannot force the process because people are afraid of monumental changes since they cannot imagine the threat of they need to sacrifice, for example. So we need to be slow and take step-by-step changes to make them accept the existence of minority integrating with the majority to begin with, like intergenerational, for example, change to be more progressive. Culture, for example, LGBTQ movement, they do not do extreme stance, but only merge. But look at right now, people will more like the degree of people that accept this kind of movement is already big anyway. This kind of we must have needed. 636. Though under our side, because you are more moderate, you can have more discussion, like with policymakers, because it will be more productive rather than you being violent. You get extreme images, for example. This kind of responses unlikely, that's less likelihood on your side of the house. At least we have provide safe place that you have more discussion. The way for this, the prerequisite for your politics movement and other movement is how people will likely to engage and opt in into your ideas. That is how you get voters to begin with. Secondly, OG case is not exclusive because this is not only talking about the impact to the misinformation and so on, but we are the only batch that do not contingent of people will be woke or not. This regardless of that, we already tell you that the organization is really need for you to have all the goals coming from other bench. We're proud to propose.
All right, thank you so much for the fine speech. Now to open the case of closing opposition, calling upon member opposition. Floor is yours. Here.
Okay, wait a minute. Okay, am I audible, everyone?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. Let me set my timer first. Set my timer first. Okay. Wait. Start my speech. Let's see the camera. Okay. Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. We're having several mechanization that differs from the opening opposition. Let's jump to the point. Like on first, under the idea of how the emphasis, like emphasis of wokeness discussion. Like for example, racism. First is to break down the systematic racism for intelligence. For example, like the integration of Black and white community, and on how the reformation of the police department or rules for in inclusive recruitment in the workplace, or under the or for example like the feminism and woman issues, like how we want to push for equal salary of men and women. We want to try to create equality for them, or for example like poor and rich, we want to pursue for the for tax the rich. Tax system should change, not only income tax but also wealth tax. And second of all, how does the political discourse in the wokeness culture would look like? First, the focus on the political discourse would be on the real and applicable policies on those issues, not only on the level of advocacy or socialization, which aim to raise awareness, but should focus on the output in the form of policy and regulations. And the third point that I would like to explain is what we want incoming opposition is that we want the emphasis on political discourse no longer on major conventional issues like like economy, environmental, healthcare, etc., etc. We want to switch the focus into societal and injustices issues, because we recognize that those issues is determined to the success of the macro issues policies. When we talk about the macroeconomic policies, about income, like for example, income inequality, we never break down and consider factors such as systematic poverty, systematic racism, like unequal payment, like the privilege system on how children who came from the underprivileged background is less likely possible to be successful as a children of a well-performing parents. One thing that we would like to rebut is the closing government whole argument is state and focus on how soft approach is work ideally rather than the hard hard approach itself. Well, we would like to see that this soft approach is not how the diplomatic way is actually not enough to confront these issues and can be seen as a solutive way to begin with. Because, and to clarify, just because the woke culture is already applied doesn't mean that all people will go all aggressive. In our sides, that when the wokeness are evenly applied, the diplomacy still exists under our side, but we choose rather to apply things such as the cancel culture, because that's the very effective and ideal way to be as solutive as possible regarding to the issues that have been taken to the table. Moving on my first argument on how the woke culture can be an appropriate tool for representing the minority itself. Understood that in the status quo, the oppression of minority is still an old sickness in society. Why the problem still exists? First, the bargaining power from society is already strong, but doesn't cover all spectrums of people. Let's see how our world is going. Like when the woke culture is not evenly applied, people are still being hammered by the system, and yet they still has no vessels to make sounds for themselves. This will only continuously cycles. Like for example, how in certain parts in Indonesia, officials and politicians still try to stop the process of building a non-majority religion place to pray. When the woke culture are applied for this specific matter, first, a boost on how minorities are now armed with stronger bargaining power, because they are actually more aware of these issues. They already understand that they are people that supporting this issue, because now people are willing to woke culture itself. And second, how this current issue will spread and gain insight, therefore creating the armies of supporters. Notice that not only the minorities will focus on this matter, but also the majorities. People will their eyes will be open, and therefore it will create the armies of supporters, therefore helping them solving this issue. And third, this will affect how politicians and officials who are not favoring societies and limiting minorities to think twice, because why? They have a reputation to protect. Therefore, they are not as powerful. They are not as there are less tendency of their playing God towards the minorities and so on and so forth. Second, how the on my second argument, how the manifestation of maintaining this woke culture in political discourse would be. First, we already put in picture previously on how in status quo the woke culture isn't evenly spread, on how the lack of woke culture will worsen those who are not represented. Now let's put a vision on what would happen if we normalize the cancel culture right here as per now. First, people will be open to more understanding regarding the minorities, like from what I previously stated, like how this will not only favor the minorities but also majorities. There will be open discussion towards the matters and the issues. And the second of all, politicians and officials will be now more aware on how they perceive and understand the issues. It's not about how they play God anymore, but it's about how they try to solve this problem with the more solutive ways. Like, we need to understand that we do aware that there is a chance for politicians to ride the wave, or at worst manipulate the mass for their political benefits, like saying they're representing for the sake of they're representing minorities, but maybe they have another political interest for the sake of the name. Response is, it is okay. It doesn't bring us any harm, because even it even bring benefits to minorities because now they have a spot for themselves, like a political vessels or political vehicles, compared to the world where the woke culture doesn't have any figure or doesn't have any politicians that have awareness undergoing these certain issues, where minorities doesn't have a major figure to be and look up with. This will not also, the culture, it's not just favor the minorities or the majorities, it even favors the politicians to gain more trust, to be trusted by the people. And what would happen if we are continuously invest on woke culture? Like, what would happen if we are continuously invest in this wokeness? First, is more educated people, because of how this woke culture already evenly spread wide. People are now. It is not about. It is not about whether or not the woke culture is hard to digest or not, because this is for the sake of many, this is for the sake of good. So if someone said that this is hard to digest, it is actually shielding themselves that they are not willing to learn the differences. Second of all, it's a lesser case on how oppression towards certain parts of groups, and more people will do check and balance towards society, and with a better understanding and awareness and reliability. And this also will be interconnecting issues, which will not only favor one or two, but mainly like how the oppression on Black people, not only how law enforcement scapegoating Black people, but also how people are oppressing certain races, like economically, or how it affects the social strata. Therefore, we would like to oppose. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for the speech. Just a gentle reminder that the time limit for you to deliver your speech is 7 minutes and 20 seconds. So after that, I will not be taking notes of the things that you guys are delivering in your speech. So yeah, please be mindful of the time limit as well. Now, to summarize and close the case from closing government, calling upon government web, floor is yours. Here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. POI to unmute. Perfect general pronounce your. I'll take POI preferably from the opening. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Judge, on both sides, we want to protect the minority, and also more people want to opt into your political view and want to make changes. The problem in opening and opposition bans is that they never explain why simply emphasizing on this is going to make people simply opt in. Because like my first speaker already told you, the urgency in the status quo is that A, there's problem of elitist seen as elitist, although secondly, this is coming from conservative country. I'm going to extend why we went over all the other branches, right? So firstly, why we went over opening, right? One, we said that opening never engaged to each other, right? They only play in their own best scenario. OG plays in this uncharitable manner that they say that it will never use, for example, in a good way, right? We are going to engage the all, right? Because they say that in best case scenario that when they have discussion, they never explain why it's going to be a discussion, right? Because A, we argue that instead they're going to be a discussion that is not, there's nuance in a negative way, because you're going to see that you emphasize on this kind of wokeness instead of trying to point out the problem. You're going to guilt trip people, for example, to say that, oh yeah, even if you're woke, you don't do anything, and this is why this is harmful on their side of the house. So we say that even if there's discussion, they never explain what's going to be good. But secondly, we're going to explain to you why discussion is going to be under our side of the house. A, because under our side of the house, when you use this kind of nuance of, or you emphasizing on this kind of wokeness, this means that you're more likely to look for the solution, right? You're likely to point out the problem that is happening in oppression, for example, and not emphasizing on, oh, you are not aware of this problem, for example, that's why you are more likely to engage under our side of the house. Exactly, because you try to point out that this is the way for you to, in order to make changes, for example, this is the way for you to create changes and want to help these people under our side of the house. On your side of the house, you're more likely to play in the scenario that you play this in the, for example, guilt trip things, that you make these people to see that, oh, why are you still not awake, right? But secondly, we say that on our side of the house, the more nuance is, the problem on opposition is that, for example, there will be discussion, right? We already told you that there's problem like elitist, right? Why do we say that this problem being elitist under our side house when you try to say that, oh yeah, you're not awake, for example? Because we say that sometimes these people, even if they are aware of the oppression, they're unable to enact it, even if they are aware because of externalities, right? For example, survival choices. In conservative area, for example, there are women who are already aware of being oppression, but they're afraid to get abandoned, punished, or get kicked out from the community. That's why they're not choosing to become like not like not progressive is not because they don't want to do it, but because of survival. On your side, you emphasize on this kind of underprivileged women who are unable to do this out of their choices, but they're on your side as they're guilt tripping them of not being awake. But secondly, there are also problem about you if you emphasize on awoke, you're going to force and guilt and like make these people to accept your idea, right? We say that this one on your side as people who are already aware but not doing anything, they cannot call themselves being woke or progressive, right? So that on your side as they're not enough for these people to like fix the issue when they don't do anything significant. For example, they won't be seen as part of your movement. So you never explain why it's okay for you to trade off this alienating these people on your side as. That is why when CO assert that, for example, these people are more likely to be aggressive simply because, for example, simply because you emphasize on it. We said on your side as people will pressure to be aggressive, right? Exactly because they will feel that even if they are aware of the problem, they are not seen as awoke if they do not create this kind of significant amount of changes. Therefore, we say the on your side as later. Therefore, on your side as you're less likely to engage. Yes, POI.
When people are when people are woke, we don't. Why do you think that people will force each other when one is exactly because they have already like a diverse amount of discussion, but also people will people will not suddenly like force each other, right? Because there's this ideal discussion, like at least there's counterbalance of the current status quo that's still focusing on the major.
Okay, so you see that under our Shadahas in the status quo right now, the problem is that, for example, you are already seen as an elitist, right? So we never explain why, even if you try to push the idea extremely in the like info side, they told you that you are associated to extreme sides of the house. So we say that on your side, even if they are aware that you want to push that, oh yeah, look, these people you are supposed to be awoke, but doesn't mean that on your side, people are more likely to engage exactly because, for example, you're going to be seen as bad, right? Because like on your side of the house, even if, for example, people are aware of the problem, they're going to be seen as simply not being awoke because, for example, they're not enough, right? So we say the discussion is not going to be good under our side house. But secondly, what is the alternative under our side house? Right? We already told you that most likely we're going to run on the case that we try to emphasize on the solution. We'll also, for example, be able to people to sympathize. We said this can run better, right? Because like what you told you, when you guilt the people, they're more likely not want to engage and oppose you. But secondly, on our side, the way we do it is trying to show that there's oppression, for example, that we can create changes happening. So on our side, people who already woke can still make changes that is more accessible unlike on your side house, because they have to show things, right? If they are woke, for example, but for not support the non-binary cases that happen in us when they're being realistic, for example, they're going to be seen as not contributing to the movement. So we say that on your side house, you're making these people you are losing supporters because you lose people who already support you in the first place, like who have the same stance as you, as saying as oppositional, exactly because you are not seen as oppositional seen as oppositional to these people, right? So why do we say that under our sadas we went over opening benches too, right? One, we already told you that under our sadas is better strategic way to become diplomatic. It's also because you, for example, are able to make it clear what the nuance under our side house, what we actually want, right? On your side, you're going to emphasize on you, for example, the emphasis on woke, for example, meaning that you're more likely to engage to these people and trying to like strategize on based on the engagement based on the nuance, based on the wokeness of these people, of them being aware or not of the problem, right? We say the problem is not them being aware of the problem or not, but the way for them to be able to access this and create changes under your side house is not accessible. Exactly because you make this kind of discussion, you are only have opinion or you only have a say when you are able to make when you are able to like create this change, or for example use these pronouns or be able to like advocate for these people. We say it's not accessible under your side house, right? We say the under your side house, when we make this discussion, only have a discussion not just only because you are awoke or not just between people who are awoke or not. So under your side house, you're able to achieve better, right? So we say that the under your side house, when you make this diplomatic and more moderate image, more people are more likely to engage to you. And because when you try to voice your opinion, it's not just based on it's not just based on you have good it's not just based on you are able to enact anything on right. Whatever to you under CG. One, we explain that this problem of being seen as elitist and under side house is going to be fixed once you, for example, take this kind of emphasis not based on that, but secondly, we mechanize also to you how discussion is going to look like and better under side house. We said it's better strategy to make people to want to engage to you. It's not because they are not being hostile to you. But thirdly, we said we are able to protect all of actors, not just people who already work unlike opposition side of the house. Under outsiders were able to capitalize this kind of strategy and political power under outsiders, it's like because you make majority to also want to listen to you, not just people, for example, on your outsiders are going to be aware and like the privileged people very proud to propose.
All right, thank you so much for the fine speech. Now to close the debate and also to summarize the case from closing opposition, calling upon opposition whip, floor is yours. You're here.
Test. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So my POI preference is by raising hand. So whenever you feel like you want to do POIs, please raise your hand. Wait, give me a minute. Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The main problem in our world is that these discriminations have gone institutionalized, ladies and gentlemen. Panels notice that these institutionalized discriminations is happening because of a long period of unawareness coming from our society. And this long period of unawareness will at the end of the day creates this system that is the discriminative system, and it has been institutionalized. And by the point where there are an uprising interest, an uprising emphasis on wokeness, we think this is a potential step for us to actually change the system, because we then as a society have a good bargaining power to the government or any official or any politicians that should be interested in this topic. So therefore that's the only way that for us to bring change. But before moving on to any further, I would like to tell you on how we are the closing opposition wins over the opening bench. So I would like to say what differentiate us to the opening oppositions, right? Opening opposition have done great job on saying there are check and balances, their political discourse is manifestation of policies, and the problem right now is the exposure of these movements. But what differentiates us from them is that we will provide a better mechanization on how to achieve more of those exposures and how this can be manifested in policies and principally and practically. But before going on to that, let's approach to opening government, right? The whole case of opening government is realized on number one, that these movements will then lose meaning, and secondly, the discourse is always bad. Two responses toward this. Number one, that they're missing the origins and the interest of the movements. The origins and the interest of the movements is to achieve revolutions. Historically, precedently, these movements is there to achieve revolution, and a revolution can only be achieved through a popular and gaining mass as many as possible. And these revolutions will only be achieved if more people are aware, and by saying that more people are aware, what we want to achieve is that more discussions on political discourse coming from these societies itself over major big conventional issues. But secondly, discussions will not always be bad, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Because at the end of the day, these discussions would be on the social media, and these discussions will cover all layers of society, and not all political figures or the figures of these movements is actually at the end of the day will have their own interest, because these movements shares their own communal interest and communal suffering. At the end of the day, the discriminated class, even when coming from the different classes, women, poor people, African American people, and etc., will then be united and be voicing up the racial discriminations. Therefore, the institutionalized discriminations will then be solved. So the discourse will not always be bad. But let's moving on to the closing debate. Right, the closing. The government come up to this room by the stance that they want a soft approach. They say they want to erase all progressivity and do the approach strategically. Therefore, they want to achieve their goal, that is an organic change. By what we question is that they don't mention what organic change they want, what kind of sustainable change that they will achieve over a long period of time of step by step, as they said. But what happens in their world at the end of the day, this soft approach will not work. Why? Because the approach that should have been done by this movement is actually the approach that should be inclusive, ladies and gentlemen. It should be gained more figures, more politicians, and even the actors that comes from a big majority class should then follow these movements. At the end of the day, more followers will in lines with more strategic bargaining power at the end of the day. But regarding the idea of the political discourse, right? We see the closing opposition see that wokeness as an awareness to racial and social injustice around, for example, racism, patriarchy, and economical gap. What the problem right now is this oppression has been institutionalized. Racism, what we want is that we want to break down systematic racism. We want integration of white and black residents. We want reformation of police department. We want rules for inclusive recruitment. In terms of feminism, for example, we want the workplace of a woman to have an equal salaries. We want to tax the rich for the problem of poor and rich, and these are all the problem from institutionalized racial social injustice, and this needs an institutionalized reformations. Institutionalized reformation can only begin if this participant of this movement have a strong bargaining power to the politicians and to the officials itself. At the end of the day, the more followers you have, the more bargaining power you have. Therefore, your opinion will then be heard. But the closing oppositions come up to this debate by saying that the manifestation will not be that good. They're saying that they're questioning to us why the discussion should be inclusive. What they want is the discussion to be exclusive. We don't want this. Why is that so? Two reasons. Number one, principally, majority contributes to discrimination, ladies and gentlemen. So principally, majority should join the discussion because there is a moral obligation that is majority's contribution to this institutionalized discrimination. On how the majority of men contributes to the discrimination of women, the majority of white people contributes to the discrimination of black people, and etc. etc. Therefore, they have the moral obligation to actually join this discussion. Therefore, it should be inclusive. This closing government also said in their framing that the status quo is not that good. They say that the politicians and the figure that holds the power are the one who is discriminative. But we think that's the idea, ladies and gentlemen, because they are the one who dominates the power. We then should strengthen our power to actually compete to their power, and by this we mean by increasing our followers. They're also saying that people from minority will be forced to join this aggressivity. But second response towards this one, no, they intentionally will join because they share the same suffering. But even if at the end of the day you're saying that this is an aggressive, we think it's an aggressive act. We think it's okay because they have the moral obligation to contribute to these movements because they're sharing the same suffering as their brothers and sisters. And this is okay. Why? Because their contribution is not so aggressive as what they've stated in their speech, because their contribution will only be voicing up in the social media and to vote for friendlier politicians. We think that this practically will have results to more mass and more exposure, therefore will result to a friendlier policies because voters will then have the interest into a friendlier politicians. Therefore, we are very proud to oppose. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for the awesome debate. This is obviously not a silent round, so you guys can return to the main hall and wait for the educators to deliberate, and we will call you back to the breakout room as soon as the deliberation time is already over. So yeah, best of luck.
Hi, everyone. Please don't leave the room, yeah. Judges, we will provide the breakout room soon.